A question asked courageously, answered honestly, and lived authentically can change your whole life. For me, that question was, how can I use what I have, what I love, and what I know to bless the lives of others? The School for Good Living and this podcast are one answer to that question. Hi, I'm Brian Miller. I know that the world can work for everyone, but that it won't until it works for you. I've created this to help you make the difference you were born to make. It's a series of conversations with thought leaders who are moving humanity forward. And in each episode, I explore their lives and the work they do. I also ask them to break down how they've gotten their books written, published, and read. This podcast is all about exploring the magic and mystery, and sometimes the misery, of the creative process. So if you have a mission, a message, and the motivation to share it, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the School for Good Living. Hello, my friends. Thanks for listening. My conversation today is with Dean Burnett. Dean is a neuroscientist, a lecturer, an author, a blogger, a podcaster, a pundit, a science communicator, comedian, and numerous other things, he says, depending on who's asking and what they need. Dean has completed his PhD in neuroscience. He specialized in the role of the hippocampus in configural learning. So I'm sure you have many questions about that, and we cover all of them in this. No, we don't. But we do talk about a couple of his books. The one that I interviewed him, I wanted to talk to him about specifically was Idiot Brain, What Your Head is Really Up To. It's one of 5 books that he's written in the last few years. He's very prolific. And this book I really enjoyed. I thought it was fascinating because I wanted to understand myself better, other people better. Maybe you do too. And this book goes through and takes a look at why we do the things we do and offers some of the latest scientific rationale, but in a very humorous way, very insightful way. Dean's writing has been published all over the world, and he's very popular, especially in the United Kingdom. His work appears in The Telegraph, BuzzFeed, GQ, BBC Focus, Lonely Planet Guide, Women's Health, the LA Times, The Big Issue, Wales Weekend Magazine, New York Moves Magazine, Pitchfork, New York Magazine, on and on and on. In this conversation, I ask him about how he married his interest and passion in stand-up comedy with neuroscience. We talk about depression and mental illness, something he's written about extensively. We talk about the blog post he wrote that had more than 3 million readers as a surprise to him, and how that was the passage from being an amateur to a pro. We talk about some of the egocentric biases that the brain has, things that we're largely unaware of, whether or not we have free will. We talk about personality, what it is, if we can change it. And then we get into a discussion about writing and the creative process, and we talk a little bit about promotion, as we often do. One of the things I realized in talking with Dean is I really love and admire people who are fundamentally creative, but also find a way to share that with others in a sustainable way. And we do this interview with Dean in his shed in the Garw Valley in Wales. Someday I want to visit and meet Dean's family. He talks a bit about them. They sound like characters. And we also, one thing that he shares is the kind of music he listens to when he writes, which you might find interesting. So really, with that, I will say, if you pick up this book, Idiot Brain, if this is an area that you find interesting at all, I think you'll really enjoy it. And I think you'll enjoy this conversation with Dean. He's a very humble guy with some interesting perspectives. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with my new Welsh friend, Dean Burnett. Dean, welcome to the School for Good Living.
Well, thank you for having me, Brian. Much appreciated being here.
Dean, will you tell me, what's life about?
I can tell you, but I can't promise it would be a valid answer or anything helpful. Again, I think for questions like that, I guess it's because of my training, because of my experience, but I always instantly revert to the sort of the biological scientific explanations. Life is a self-sustaining sequence of processes and a means to convey genetic material, and a means to sustain and maintain an environment. But that's obviously not what people want to hear. They want to say that you are a bag of carbon which exists to further patterns of molecules. That's not really the most inspiring. You don't get that in a meme. Don't get that on the wall of a gym. So no, I don't really know. It's I tend not to actually delve into the really big questions like that, because personally, because it strikes me as this is more the realm of philosophy, spirituality, and things like that. And those are, unlike some scientists, I don't have any problem with these things, but they're also not my area. I'm not trained in these things, and I think I'm very much a stay in my lane sort. Like, these are big questions and people can answer them, but beyond wild speculation, I'm not qualified to do so. So I tend not to think about them that much, I suppose. I mean, I guess it's a more peaceful way to live.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think even people who are trained in these, in philosophy and spirituality, they still don't know.
No, I don't think anyone actually knows. It's one of those questions which can't actually be known, but obviously people are curious. And it does remind me of one time I was doing a talk in Amsterdam. It was a 90 minutes plus 30 minutes Q&A. It was quite a long one. They paid for me to go over there, so they want to get their money's worth, which I totally understand. But it was like 30 minutes Q&A after a 90-minute talk. I was quite tired. It was the second day in a row I was doing this. I said, right, look at my watch. We've got maybe a minute left. So I said, we've got time for one last quick question. Some guy put his hand up. He goes, yes. And he goes, is free will real? That is not a 1 minute.
Well, that was on my question list, by the way. I'm going to. So
you prepared it at least. As an off-the-cuff answer for 1 minute. That's been 4,000 years and counting. People will be working on that one, and I can't answer it right now. Sorry, mate. So I get the big questions a lot, but I'm always a bit like I can't help you.
Yeah. Well, okay, fair enough. So let me go back in your early life to Bridgend General Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand this is where you were born.
Yes.
In Wales.
Mm-hmm.
And that hospital was shut down, abandoned, and demolished not long after you were born. Is this true?
As far as I'm aware, yes. I mean, I don't know the exact time scales, but I know I remember seeing it as a kid when it was boarded up. But then it's gone. So yes, essentially it's been demolished, and the place I was born has been erased from existence, which is always encouraging.
Yeah, just proof, more evidence. The only constant is change.
Yes,
right.
I mean, I was never emotionally attached to the hospital I was born in, so it wasn't like a traumatic thing. It was just that's a little on the nose.
Yeah. Well, I wonder too. People who know you, who know your work, know that you synthesize. You walk in two usually different worlds between science and comedy, and you're able to create something from that. Maybe have a unique perspective. But where I'm going with this right now is I understand that you really develop some of your comedic chops in a pub. Is this? Will you tell me about this?
Yeah. Well, it's. I guess you could say that. It's not something I really thought about at the time, but it is, in hindsight, that was a big part of it. I grew up in a pub. From the age of 2, my parents moved into one of the local village pubs, and they owned it. They ran it. They were the landlords. And so I grew up in the Garrow Valley, which is just north of Bridgend. Is a mining village built around the coal mine. And I imagine you have similar things in the States when like the towns in the Midwest, which have a plant or a factory, which the town exists around it because it sustains everyone. And then the factory gets shut down and the place still exists. And it's sort of like a weird twilight existence. And that's sort of the community I grew up in. So you have this community full of, dedicated to coal mining, a very, very manly physical job. And in the 80s, that was shut down. And so I grew up in a remote, isolated community, which is kind of bereft of purpose. So the pubs were busy. Like there was not a lot else to do. Like a lot of suddenly unemployed miners with no real need for their existence. So you see a lot of characters. You see a lot of people trying to kill time. People trying to find something to do during the day. It's a lot of wacky characters. My father's very much a larger than life, rabble rousing character, and so the Burnett family themselves are quite gregarious individuals. I was always the quiet, shy one, which is quite an anomaly, should we say. But I observed, I saw all this, and I sort of wanted to be part of the fun and games, the hijinks and everything. And that sort of informs your sensibility. It's kind of hard to take things especially seriously when that's the environment you grew up in, when your experience of adults is drunken ones singing and dancing and falling over, and you grew up thinking adults are these stern presences which control the world. You can't really maintain that that sort of divide between children and adult superior when you constantly see them in various states of inebriation. Yeah, when they drunkenly wander into your childhood bedroom going, "Oh, sorry, thought it was the bathroom," and just walking out again. That's that does leave a lasting impression. So I mean, that never sort of maybe especially want to be a comedian or comedy writer. But in hindsight, it's kind of easy to see how that would have very much coloured my perception of the world as you grow, especially as it was happening during my childhood. Obviously, a very informative developmental time.
Yeah, and another thing I found interesting, and of course, we can't ever certainly believe anything we read online, but I read that pub ultimately was also torn down. Is this true?
It's not been torn down yet, but it is derelict. It's boarded up. It's vandalized. It's a husk of a building. I mean, this is in my second book, so I very much it was a sort of like a little experiment I ran with myself. Like if I went back to my childhood home, how would I feel? You know, from a neuroscientific perspective, I have all these memories of childhood very fond. But you know, if I went back to the place now, because I feel people say this a lot, like when you revisit a former home or a childhood home, something which has lasted an impression, it's quite it's an emotionally confusing experience, and I wanted to see how that would affect me in with my technical knowledge. But I got there. I was thinking, like, it's a pub. I can go in, I can wander around, and I did a few times after we moved out. It was still an open pub then. It was always weird. It was always like, you know, it forces a friction onto your sort of your mental state, because I was both, you know, when I was an adult, I was a punter in the pub. I was a customer. I was allowed to be there and drink with my friends, which is what I was there for. But also, this is the environment I grew up in. This is my childhood home, so I should behave like a child right now. And it was very. I mean, I didn't have to drink as much because it already got me halfway there with that sort of confusion. But yes, when I went back again, it was derelict. It's abandoned now, which is it's a very bittersweet experience. You know, it's just a building. It's not something I have any attachment to now, but it was a place of a lot of fond memories, and to see it in a state of disrepair isn't never really a pleasant thing. So, it was an interesting experience to do that.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm always fascinated when I'm able to travel in the United Kingdom and think about what an incredible force it's been in, you know, global politics and shaping culture and just how, you know, I have a friend who's English, and he'll joke with me about how his front door is older than our country. But it's not
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, like down the road from me, like in Wales, is the country in the world which has more castles per capita than any other place on the planet. It's we have a lot of just old castles around, and I used to play in one. Is a castle called Ogmore Castle, and we just go there and play a lot. And then someone pointed out that you used to play, just you can climb on it, you can go jump in it. To play on like a 1,500-year-old castle as a kid, that's rare. You know, in hindsight, that is actually. I just didn't think anything of it at the time because I was 5. But
that's
being
cool.
able to do that it's a strangely unique experience, and very very much privilege, obviously.
Yeah. Well, Dean, when I reached out to you for this interview, and I'm so glad that you accepted, there were a few reasons, mostly my own curiosity, you know, that I wanted to talk with you. And I love reading your book, Idiot Brain, what your head is really up to, because, you know, I wonder about other people, about myself. Absolutely. Let me, before I ask a few questions about that book, I want to keep with your life background. I understand that you spent a couple years embalming cadavers.
Yes, that was my job after my undergraduate degree, before my postgraduate degree. So I did a neuroscience degree in Cardiff, where I still live, Cardiff University, and I'm the first person from my family to even do like secondary school, college standards. You know, it's not like my family aren't stupid, but it wasn't necessary when the coal mines were a thing, and it was just not an academic background. You don't consider these options, but I was the first one to actually be scholastically inclined, so I ended up doing that in my school, and the school wanted to encourage me.
How was your family with that? Were they were
very happy indeed, but also confused, because they want to support me, they want to help me, and they do everything they can, but they don't know what it is I'm doing, because so once you get to A levels, like, oh, those are exams beyond the ones we did. Okay, well, good. Then they go to university, like just shrugging their shoulders. Okay, well, do whatever you need to, and that's they've always been. I'm very privileged in the support of my family. I've never lacked for that, but it's just a generic blank check support. It's not like any specific dedicated help. It's whatever you're doing, carry on. We're always here for you, but we have no idea how to help you, because this isn't a world we know, and which is totally fair. But yeah, so I went to university, did that, and I was sort of worried about being one of those people. I'm not sure how common they are, but I was worried about it, that people who were like stay in education because they don't want to get their hands dirty. They want to, like they sort of like, oh, I don't want to face real work yet, and keep putting it off. Students are accused of that often in this country. Just you're not really learning. You're just having a 3-year-long party and things like that. But so I was kind of wary of that. I think I needed real world experience beyond living in a small village. And that's why I thought, well, I'll work. I felt I could do a PhD, but thought, well, maybe I need more real life experience. So I'll try to find a job. And the only job going, which I was qualified for, which paid my rent and everything, was anatomy technician at the Cardiff University Medical School.
I can that just conjures so much. Anatomy technician, like
yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, exactly. It sounded sort of nicely generic because I'm sure I can, I can hand out pipettes and and stethoscopes and move some bones around if needs be. And no, it involves embalming cadavers. The recently deceased volunteers who come to you and need to be pumped full of formaldehyde and formalin and phenol, and to preserve them for over a year, because they will be slowly dissected by medical students who are training to learn surgery and anatomy. Oh. So that was they asked me after the interview, they said, "Are you squeamish?" I said, well, I hope not, because this is obviously something I've decided not to do. And I did that for the best part of 2 years. And there was one incident involving, I think I knew when I had to sort of move on, because I thought, well, I don't feel happy here, because it involves handling dead bodies all day and cutting them open, which isn't the most cheerful job at the best of times. But one day I sort of left. When you embalm someone, you sort of put the pump, the injection points into the femoral artery, the big artery in the leg, and the machine pumps formalin through the whole system overnight, because obviously it's got to be a slow, gradual process to make sure every part of the body gets fixed, chemically fixed. So I came in next morning, and I left the pump on slightly too high, because the donor gentleman had swollen up somewhat, was... it can happen. Like, oh dear, you just turn it off, it sort of deflates slowly, and it's not great, but it happens. But this particular elderly gentleman passed away of throat-related issues. So again, this is a bit bleak for your listeners, but I can almost safely say that I'm one of the first people on earth to be projectile vomited on by a corpse.
Oh.
And then I thought, this is a bit much. So I think I had like 6 or 7 showers in a row, because I was in a shower room, and I realized I needed to finish that job then when I went home that day, and I just got me a glass of red wine thinking, oh God. And my housemate came home and said, how was work? And I instantly said, oh, same old, same old. I'm a bit too used to this. I think I need to find something new to do, because when that becomes generic, then you need to...
Yeah, it's time to move on.
I think that was a good choice. Yeah.
So, on this topic, I read... So I want to hold a human brain. I never have. I don't have a science background myself. But last year, I read Walter Isaacson's biography of Leonardo da Vinci. Mm-hmm. And I read about how he would, work with cadavers and with horses. And I was so fascinated by an artist who was so committed to his art that he would want to know the muscle and the sinew and how it created emotion on the face and in the body and all this. And so it really inspired me, because I think I've been... Squeamish is probably the right word, reluctant.
It's fair, though.
Yeah. And I thought, man, I think if I held like a stomach, a liver, a brain, and I could be with it, that it probably would change me, in some ways. And so my wife and I, we made some New Year's resolutions. We're looking forward to, 2019 and saying, what do we want to do? And who do we want to be this year and all this. And I said to her, I think I surprised her, I want to hold a brain. And she was very quick to point out the context in which one holds a brain is really important, you know?
Of course, yeah.
But so if you were to give me, or strangely anyone listening who also wanted to hold a brain, some advice, how would you recommend I go about that?
Well, the first time I saw a human brain was when I was visiting universities with a view to being a student there. I hadn't settled on neuroscience yet. I looked into genetics, medicine. Like, I was a multi-purpose biologist at the time, thinking, what am I interested in? And went to the open day in Cardiff University for the neuroscience course. And the professor was just giving us a tour of the teaching establishment, the labs and stuff. And then he went into the lab and just got this white bucket and just popped it open and said, so here's a human brain. We had gloves on. I was like, oh, okay, that's a literal human brain just there, like 3 feet in front of me. just in a bucket, just sat there. Like there was like 5 on a shelf. I thought, that is cool. Like that, yeah, I want to do that, and that's why I ended up doing that, and that's why I'm talking about this sort of thing now. It's obviously it's not the most common thing to be able to do. Like people don't have brains knocking about in their fridge, and if they do, you should call the authorities or someone.
Yes, serious,
they shouldn't. I say like universities are the place to go for that sort of thing. Okay, places with research establishments. I mean, I think they are aware of that effect. The fact that, like in this white bucket, like you just popped out, is the most complex thing in the known universe as far as we're aware, and the source of all human endeavor, all experience, all imagination, all language, all reason, all sensation is just here in this 2-pound lump in my hand. that is really quite something. It is quite a. It did change because I was like, oh, well, that's what I want to do. I want to just be able to get a bucket and just hold one. That was quite a motivating factor at the time. But yeah, there are science institutions, establishments, and psychology departments. It might not be like a sort of a fresh brain. Well, hopefully it won't be a fresh brain, but they have something like they have samples lying around, or they have fixed ones or plasticated ones. So there are options. It's not that common a thing, obviously, but if you look up your local psychology department or your nearest one, they should be able to point you towards someone who could do that, especially if you are going to mention it on here, because they always like the attention publicity. So
yeah,
it could happen.
Yeah, I can feel the reluctance inside myself of like, now that, I mean, and I knew it wouldn't be that hard to find out how to do it, but I've been putting it off, but I'm strangely drawn to it. So
yeah, well, it's a very reasonable thing because it's an odd thing. It's a profound thing to do, but the sensation itself is a very mundane one. Technically, it's just an organ. It's just holding in your hand. It's got weight. It's got presence. It's got substance. It feels so mundane in a purely sensory way. It's the awareness of what it is. That's what really sort of makes it a vivid experience, should we say?
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the things that I loved about this book about Idiot Brain, well, first of all, I love some of the descriptions you use. Really brilliant. In fact,
I've often been credited for my analogies. Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the one like something being as difficult as knitting a sweater out of cotton candy. It's like that would be really hard. Yeah. And many of these metaphors and images that helped not only make the book more enjoyable but make it more comprehensible. So I want to actually just pull on that a little bit and ask you now. How with this book, and I imagine probably with all your work, how do you arrive at like such colorful, and useful ways of explaining things?
I think part of it comes from, like I mentioned, my background earlier on. Like I'm the first in my family to do A-levels of any sort, let alone go to university and doctor level things. So, again, my default assumption when I'm writing anything or talking to anyone is that the person I'm communicating with is at least as smart as I am. They just don't know what I know. So, it's just like they don't have the vocabulary, but they completely have the smarts to keep up. And I think that's a useful default to work towards. Nobody can't understand this. They just don't have the right words yet. So, yeah. So that's my approach to it. So, that sort of it comes from there. There's nothing people I'm talking to can't understand. It's just they need to put it in terms which they probably have access to already. So then you start thinking of more contemporary and more mainstream, or just more familiar references which have some vague bearing on it, or at least some sort of sensory aspect, or some equivalent level of confusion, like or difficulty, like say knitted a sweater out of cotton candy, which would be infuriatingly difficult. I think, like, obviously, I talk to my family a lot and my friends growing up, and people I still communicate with who I'm still talking to them a lot, who aren't neuroscientists. So I spend a lot of my time talking to people who, again, I consider at least as smart as me, but just don't have my vocabulary. They ask, like, well, what do you do? And I tell them, but in words.
And you don't just start talking about the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and the pulvinar nucleus with the left medial temporal lobe and posterior hippocampus. Like, you're not just
not anymore. No.
Not just leading with that.
It's not the best chat-up line, I'll be honest. But it's so I don't do that because I thought, well, even sometimes I'm struggling to remember. Oh yes, the hypothalamus. I struggle to keep the terms in my head still because I guess it comes from I wasn't raised in such a background. A lot of academics are from academic families and have parents who are doctors or researchers, or at least some versatility in the field before they start, whereas I never had that. So I sort of had to explain it to myself in many ways. And like, what is this thing? Okay, what do I know which sounds a bit like this? And so I think that's how my mind works anyway, maybe at the best of times. So
Yeah.
So there was that to it. And again, part of it comes from doing the stand-up comedy as well, which I started doing before I did my PhD, after neuroscience and things. And, when you do that, it's a very enjoyable thing to do if you can get away with it. If it goes horribly wrong every time, it's not enjoyable, it's terrible.
Yeah.
But again, you are stood in front of people, like a room full of people who have paid to see you more often than not. Not just you, whoever else is on the night as well. But like, they don't know you. They have no reason to give you, a break. They don't care that you're a scientist. So you have to win them over in rapid time in words that they don't find alienating. And it sort of just pressures you to think in those terms, I guess. I would recommend to any scientist who wants to get into more communication side of things to do some stand-up comedy, but not a dedicated science stand-up comedy, because those things exist. They're great, but they are for people who are already interested in science. When you can sort of talk about it to a room full of people who have no prior interest, no reason to be interested, and still keep them engaged, then that sort of really sort of sharpens your abilities in that area. So it's a combination of all these factors, really. It just it's ended up that's how my mind works now, I guess. So
Yeah.
And why fight it? It seems to work out.
No, it does. I think it's really masterful, and it's consistent. It's not like you start strong and it flags, but all the way through the book is that way. For people, and probably not just scientists, although I think that's great advice. Anybody who wants to be a more effective leader, maybe more charismatic. I imagine having that kind of training, or at least exposure to some of these principles of communication and, and things, is great. How would you advise somebody go about it? I mean, is this, they find an improv troupe? Is there specific comedy classes, online courses? Like, what would you say?
Well, for me, it was, I wanted to try stand-up because I was always too scared to, it's one thing I thought, well, that's the most pure way of doing it. My family are all like singers and dancers, performers, and I never had any musical inclinations, which was obviously annoying for them and me. I wanted to be part of the choir, and I was like, I did a lot of I did comedy plays at university, like the student panto and some improv, so that all that stuff was there. But I thought, well, this is all either scripted, or it's other people's words, or I bounce off other people, and I just felt like I wanted to do it. And then the whole started working with cadavers, which does shift your perspective of what you find tolerable or not. So when I said I was always scared through stand-up comedy, but then I spent 2 years working with dead people, and my perspective shifted to, well, worst case scenario, I do a gig, nobody laughs, but they're still breathing. So that's literally a step up from my day job. So it's a win-win for me. And so I just tried it that way. And again, different comedy scenes work differently in different places, different cities, different regions. But for me, and the Cardiff is actually a very small comedy scene. It was even small at the time when I started. We're talking 2004. I just went along to an open mic night, where people can try it out, and saw the standard of other acts on, and some were good, some were like, oh, I could probably do better than that at least. I have enough faith in my material to do this much, and just asked if I could have a go. And it wasn't sort of like a baptism of fire, like I never tried this before. I did a few things with the dramatic club I was part of. But again, it was a safe environment. It was like I'm just messing about with friends here, and I'm not actually doing it in front of strangers. And I think that's the key part. It's good to practice doing with your mates and doing it, in friendly environments. But then, in order to really get the benefit, you need to do it in front of people who have no prior investment in you, who probably will never see you again. So, pardon me, who have no reason to give you an easy time of it. People who don't need to be honest with you, should we say? Or no, people who don't need to sugarcoat it. And then those are the ones you really want to be able to win over and stuff. So, but yeah, having to think on your feet. Any situation where you have people looking at you and you have to do and say things which engage them and win them over in real time, that's probably, I can imagine all the sort of experience melds into the same sort of thing. It's again, in the US, you have a lot of improv stuff, so that's probably a good place to start, and big comedy scenes. So just go along to an open mic night and see what the quality is, see what the standard is. And if you think you can do it, then ask them for a go. They could say, come back tomorrow. They say, can you do tonight? Say, can you come back in a month or something? But I think my first ever night was true baptism of fire, because it was quite a tough pub in Cardiff anyway. I didn't sort of realise at the time, but it was quite known to be a rowdy one, with local residents who had little or no time for people messing around on stage. But I didn't know anywhere else. So I said I'll have a go, and they said, "Yeah, come back next week. You can do the open spot." And I thought, great. The 5 minutes in the middle, there's an opener, there's a middle spot, there's a headliner, and this little Burke me just doing a little bit. And so I got there, and the MC was there, and while I was waiting, all the other acts said they couldn't make it, so it was just me and him. So I went from open spot to headliner in a space of like 10 minutes, and I think at that point my nervousness center just burnt out to like pop. All right, well, this is ludicrous. I'm just going to do it now and see what happens. So it went fine. It was good. Got laughs. So that was the main thing. And yeah, so I've been doing it on and off since then, really. But it's never something I pursued as a career. I'm not sure if I ever could, because I like more certainty in my life. But yeah, I advise anyone to do it at least once, so you can say you've done it. But do it properly. Do it in a room full of people who have no reason to give you an easy time of it. And I think that's the key factor there.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
No problem.
So let me ask you this. So with this book, Idiot Brain, what your head is really up to, who did you write it for and why?
Well, the genesis of the book is kind of an odd one too, because I never actually planned on being a book writer, an author. To begin with, I assumed I'd be a low-level, unremarkable neuroscientist my entire life. Like, I've made it that far, that'll do nicely. Then I sort of started doing the comedy stuff, but the Cardiff scene was quite small, so you had to wait like 2 or 3 months between gigs because there's plenty of other actors coming behind you. But I always liked the writing part of it more, like writing the material, and then I thought, I guess I got to perform this now. And I never performed the same set twice because I guess I just got bored with it. I wasn't really working towards being a full-time comic. And then I discovered blogging as a concept. So you can just write this, put it on the internet, people can look at it if they want, and that's it. That's great. That's exactly what I want. Started doing that. I thought, well, what's my USP, my unique selling point as well? I get a lot of attention for being the comedy neuroscientist, and I'll try to do humor about science. People do a lot of jokes about politics and stuff. Why not with science? And well, it turns out there's good reasons why not. But I try to push through those a lot of the time.
What are some of those reasons?
Science isn't really. It's not as relatable as politics for a start, because of things like politics or like sport, because those things have people are universally aware of those things in a big part of everyday life. Whereas science, although technically it is, awareness of it isn't so much. It's you get sort of the token nod towards science, like the cool explosions and stuff, but it's not. General appreciation of science isn't as default as like the awareness of football or baseball or politics or anything like that.
Yeah.
Or like entertainment stuff, because celebrity news and stuff. Science doesn't get that sort of coverage. And science itself is, by definition, a system which involves logic and order and consistency and deep analysis, which doesn't really lend itself to a lot of humor sometimes, which involves irreverence and predictability and things. So, but it can work. I think it just took a bit of trial and error. But so I was doing this blog about it, and it sort of picked up a bit of interest on Twitter and a bit more here and there, and I got some media nods for it. And then I wrote a guest piece for the UK's Guardian, about the depressing day of the year phenomenon, which I have extensive experience with, and that got a good reception. And then I did a few more posts for them, and then they said they're expanding their blog network. Can anyone interested, let's pitch a blog? And I said, well, I could do my stuff for you guys. It's a big platform, but if you're interested, you want to take a chance on the comedy science guy. And didn't hear anything for 6 months, assumed to just delete my email on reflex. Oh, good God, no. But then it turned out they're just slow. So they said, yeah, we'd love to add you, and got through the Guardian. And turns out there was an audience for it. I sort of gradually became the number one science blog on the Guardian network, regularly having viral hits and stuff. So there was clearly an interest there. And then an agent, a literary agent, approached me out of the blue and said, your blog's really good. You ever thought about writing a book? And I sort of, first of all, I thought it was a scam. I said, how do I write this book? Do I send $500 to your Nigerian bank account? Yeah, of course I do. Probably the other one. I wasn't born yesterday. But no, he's a real guy. He's my agent now, because he's the first one I met. So yeah, he'll do. That's fine. But,
that's great.
Yeah. But so I thought, well, I guess I had thought about writing a book, but in the same way I had thought about owning a jetpack or going to Mars. Like, these are that'd be nice. Not going to happen. Don't worry about it. Just
Yeah.
sort of moved on in my life. But one of the main reservations I had, I guess, is because I'm not actually a top level neuroscientist at all. I never actually achieved much in terms of getting my name out there in the research field. You know, like I had a lot of really bad luck in my PhD, lab shutdowns, poor results, and so on. So I was never a prominent neuroscientist in terms of, you know, as my peers would recognize as one. I was actually quite low down the ranking, and I was struggling to find work, and that's why I ended up doing lecturing and teaching more often than not. So I didn't think I was allowed to write a book, if that makes any sense, because all the main neuroscience books I read a few, I reviewed a few magazines, and they're all written by big names in the field, you know, Susan Greenfields and Eagleman, David Eaglemans and things like that. And I thought, well, like, I'm not one of them, so you know, don't worry about it. But that's not how it works, is it? Because I was that guy who wrote the Guardian blog. I was that guy now. So, but then another reason I didn't think I would be able to or allowed to write a book about the brain is because one of the main problems I've always had with the mainstream coverage of neuroscience and the brain is the default sort of reverence there is for the brain, and justifiably a lot of the time, because it is, you know, the seat of all human consciousness. It's the seat of the mind. It's it causes all human endeavor, and it's the source of all our lives. Like, it is an incredibly complex organ which we still know precious little about in real terms. But there's just like this reverence of like it's amazing, it's fantastical, it's beyond our understanding, but this idea that it's sort of like some sort of mystical, perfect object, you know, so powerful. But when you start studying neuroscience for any length of time, you sort of realize just how incredibly messy and annoying and irrational and counterproductive and inefficient it is. Because it's an organ, it's evolved over millions of years, and nature isn't always perfect. It just goes, if it works, just keep doing it. And that's, you know, there's no grand plan in the brain. So it is a big mess of contradictions.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Do you mind if I just jump in there and ask you about one while we're on that? Because in your book, you write, the brain interferes with almost every food-related decision.
Yes. Yeah,
as an example of what you're talking about, will you just touch on that a little bit? Yeah.
Well, arguably, the brain makes every food-related decision in that, obviously we decide to eat. It's our brain doing that. But the human body is obviously depends on food for survival, and we have an incredibly sophisticated, highly evolved, complex digestive system. You know, all the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, all the villi, and the surface, so the capillaries inside that, which work diligently to process all the food we have and get all the maximum nutrients out of it. All the gut bacteria, there are trillions of bacteria which exist inside our gut. It's a whole other ecosystem which allows us to break down food and get the right things from it and develop it in certain ways. And we have the enteric nervous system, the nervous part of the nervous system dedicated to regulating the digestive system, which is so complex and so sophisticated and can act quite independently. It's often labeled the second brain by a lot of neuroscientists because it's so complex and intricate. So we have this, and we have the leptins, the ghrelins, the hormone systems which decide when we are and aren't hungry and suppress appetite in response to our elevated sugar levels. So we have an incredibly sophisticated, complex digestive system which helps us decide when to eat, what to eat, and how much to eat. And every time the brain gets involved, it just messes it up completely because it overrules the stomach and digestive system when it really shouldn't. We eat more depending on how much we can remember eating. Like there are amnesiacs who gain weight rapidly because they don't remember having eaten recently, even though they did. Even though the stomach is technically still full of food right at the moment, they don't recognize it because the brain hasn't got a record of it, and then they just keep eating because it's lunchtime as far as they're concerned.
Yeah.
Like habits and stuff. If you eat a certain time of day, you'll be hungry that time of day, even if you've eaten an hour earlier. The test they did in Bristol University, which I'm still a big fan of, where they trick people into thinking they've eaten big bowls of soup or small bowls of soup, and people got hungry correspondingly later or shorter earlier times. But the whole time they had an elaborate setup involving pumps and pipes. That someone was having the big bowl of soup drained from the bottom, someone having the small bowl with pump from the bottom, and they were eating a lot more than they thought, but it didn't matter.
Who designs these experiments?
I know. That's the sort of stuff I want to do. It's basically an elaborate prank, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It totally is.
It's almost like Science Meets Jackass, but very, very, very low key, very not destructive.
That's amazing. That was a study in this book, one of many that I found like, wow, like that really happens, right? Based on what we believe, what we perceive, what we believe, how we behave, no surprise, but to see, example after example of how we behave in ways that we're ignorant to, because of this brain that on the one hand is such a gift, but on another hand is such a trickster.
Yeah. And that goes back to the original point, as in when I said I didn't want to write a book, well, I didn't feel I could write a book because I don't think the brain is as amazing as people say it is, or everyone seems to think it is.
Yeah.
And then the response was, well, why not write that book then? I think I could. I think it would be handy to puncture some of the reverence the brain has, because I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's good to assume that the human brain is this infallible, perfect object, because it's very much not, and it sabotages us, or it just hinders our lives in so many ways.
Yeah.
Or the rates of mental health problems in the world, or just the unnecessary anxieties we experience, or the lapses in memory. And I thought, well, if there's a book out there which people could read and go, oh, that's why that happens. Oh, it's okay for my brain to be backfiring constantly because everyone's does.
Yeah, that's just how it works, right?
This is how we work. And
And I found there were so many times when I felt like a little kid watching, like here in the States, and I'm sure, Mr. Rogers, maybe some of the younger folks listening won't know who that is, but I was fascinated, by things that you would share, like how motion sickness, by what's going on. Well, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, because I think what might be useful is if you would just give an overview of how did you structure the book? Like how did you organize it? And why did you choose that? Like what, and then what would that do for somebody? Why would somebody want to read this book, or what would they get out of it?
Yeah. I guess the overall structure of the book it was my first ever book, so I was still kind of in my comfort zone of blog writing. That was what I came up via. That's what I'm known for at the time. So I was essentially writing, it essentially is a collection of brain related articles or blog posts, if you want to be that technical about it. So it's not like it's not really a narrative. It's just a collection of, here are some interesting things about the brain, each explained one by one. So it's a good sort of pick down, put up sort of book. Yeah, I'm going to keep plowing through to find out what happens next. But my sort of approach to structuring it was, because obviously being a neuroscientist, I know that the brain has different areas, different levels, which handle different functions. And I thought it would be intriguing to go from most fundamental / primitive to most sophisticated. So it starts off with the basic housekeeping stuff, the motion, the control, and things like that. And sleep is in the first section, I think, isn't it? Like the ability to sleep, and how that is more complex than you think, but it's such a basic, primitive, fundamental function. We can't not do it.
Well, and on that topic, to just jump in again and interrupt your flow of how it's structured, but that was another area where what you said about sleep, I just found to be so fascinating. And I've been reflecting on quite a bit about how, we ultimately, still don't know why we sleep, right?
No, we don't really know. We have there's lots of different possibilities.
Yeah,
but
it's not like boom, that's it. And the point that you made about that, first of all, at least in certain stages of sleep, certain times we sleep, the brain is more active than when we're awake. And so sleep is not evidently only, or maybe even, at all about rest and recovery, because you make that point that if that were the case, we would sleep longer after a long day of physical activity, but that's not necessarily the case. And so it's this mystery of what is sleep doing for us, Yeah,
lots of different possibilities, but it's so weirdly essential. I think we can't quite work out why it's so essential. Like so even, I think I mentioned about even dolphins sleep with a half a hemisphere at a time.
Yeah.
So they can sleep while still moving.
Yeah.
But you think if sleep wasn't, especially, if sleep could be got rid of, it would have been by creatures like this, or migratory birds. They sleep half a brain at a time because they need to keep moving and flying.
Yeah, and I love your and that's one of the things I love about it, where you do present, well, here's one possibility, here's one possibility, here's one possibility, and then I love that although I definitely, as a reader, I respect you as an authority, but I love that you didn't just say, this is the truth with a capital T, we've got it all figured out, and that one in sleep in particular, where you said, I'd never thought of this, that, some people believe that sleep is an evolutionary, it's an evolution thing where our predators came out at night. So we slept to avoid them, and boom, we wake up in the daytime. I'd like something that simple. I'd never heard before. It never occurred to me. It's
No,
interesting.
it wouldn't occur to me, I'll be honest. But there are so many interesting and exotic theories as to how we evolved the way we did and for what reason. Some of them are baffling. I can't remember if it made it to the book, but there's a theory about why human women have permanent breasts. A lot of people say it's a secondary sex characteristic because most mammals don't. Most.
I don't think
mammals.
that's in the book. I think I would have remembered that. But go ahead and tell us now. What's the theory here?
Well, there are plenty of theories. It's basically a sign of secondary sex characteristics tend to be quote unquote superfluous to show that you can have these big things like a deer's antlers. They're not. Those are quite resource consuming, or peacock's feathers. Those are.
Yeah.
Look at the energy I can afford to waste on this lot, and
then you're capable of reproducing and therefore a desirable mate.
Yeah. I have abundant stuff to share, so come and get it. And like women's breasts show vitality, health, and fertility, and all that sort of stuff. But the theory I read, which was like, it still makes me laugh thinking about it now, is that the reason that human women evolved permanent breasts is because they resemble, from the front, the view of our mother's buttocks, which was comforting when we were a primitive chimp climbing trees. That is quite a leap.
That's a stretch. And it could be true.
Well, that's an evolution view. No one was there. You can't watch it in real time. So there's stuff like that, which is, this is technically actual science. And I think people miss out on that a lot by focusing on the big, profound questions and like the deep physics. So like, there's this stuff too, guys. Scientists are still human. They do a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah. So you structure the book. I love this. And pick up, put down. I love that term too. Somebody can pick it up. They could read. They can learn something. They can enjoy it. Put it down. You move to another section, and so this process of the stuff that was maybe most ancient, most primitive, fundamental to our existence as it relates to the brain is early, and then in the end of the book where you're talking about things as complex as addiction and mental illness. And helping us understand. And by the way, this is one thing that I just want to acknowledge you for and thank you for, is I actually think you write this book with a lot of compassion. I don't know if you meant to or if you hear that, but I found myself thinking, man, if this guy was a therapist, and I wanted a therapist, I would call this guy, about things where, we often blame people who are depressed or people who, die by suicide. That, we somehow call them selfish or make it wrong and things like this. And I love your view, even that depression, like that we would probably do well as a society if we used another word. Because will you talk about that?
Of course, yeah. This is something I've written a lot about in recent years as well. But that technically is the reason the book exists in the first place. Because I was writing for The Guardian and the blog and stuff, and I think I mentioned it in the book, but I was the jester of the science blog network, shall we say? Like the people did proper science, and then
there's Dean.
One of those wacky takes. I think someone said, how HBO used to show like soft porn and boxing to pay for the prestige dramas. That was me. I was just the guy who brought the numbers in so everyone else could do proper stuff. And I was fine with that. I thought, that's more than I expected to be for someone who never got really much cred in the actual science world. And then, I was just chugging along nicely. People were like, he's that guy. That's a bit of fun. But at the time I was teaching a psychiatry course. I was working as a lecturer tutor on psychiatry e-learning master's program. So I had to learn everything I could about psychiatry at the time as a discipline, as a subject, not as like a practice. I'm not allowed to treat patients, but I have a lot more awareness about how to do that than most people would, because it was my job for 7 years at the postgraduate level. So I was deeply immersed in the mental health field at the time as well. And then, so I walked into work one day in 2014 and turned the computer and news were broken that Robin Williams had passed away, obviously by suicide, which is obviously a very sad day for everyone. I was obviously quite gutted. I was a big fan of the guy. And I know he Disney's Aladdin and stuff. I grew up with a lot of that sort of thing. And I was like, and I thought, I've been thinking, it's going to be like, if it hasn't happened yet, it'll be like the next half hour. And then you saw the takes like, people like pundits say it's so selfish to do this. He's caused so much pain to so many people. And as someone who studied and was learning and teaching about depression at the time, thinking, well, it's not that. And, I saw a lot of it growing up. And the pub I lived in, there were plenty of mental health issues. And we lost people to suicide. And Bridgend was particularly hard hit by that in the late 2000s because of a spate which was made much worse by terrible media coverage. So this is obviously a sensitive subject for me. I'm very aware of it. And I'm thinking like, oh, it's not self. That's not how it works. So, I think I was thinking everyone surely knows that. I mean, turns out they didn't. But I thought, well, someone should just call this out. Someone just says should just point out that it's not selfish. Someone in the media should do that. And then remembered, well, I have this Guardian blog I can just do stuff for. Well, I could do it. It doesn't seem like anyone else is doing it. And I don't know, it was like 90 minutes. I wrote a quick post like, here's why depression isn't selfish in the context of Robin Williams, of course. And, all the explanations about it. And I said to the Guardian, they said, well, we'll put it up in a bit, but, there's lots of stuff about this today, so don't get your hopes up. It'll be covered much. Obviously, it's fine. I wanted to say I'd done something which could feasibly be helpful. And it went up, and I think within an hour, it'd been read 50,000 times. And then 2 days later, it'd been read like 3 million times. It turns out there was something people wanted to hear and hadn't heard. And I had no idea. It was just a little off the cuff. Wow. Well, I'll feel better for doing this if nobody else does. And obviously, a massive viral hit. I was like still quoted today, still referenced today. And it got me noticed as I was then. And then I was the mental health guy. And then publishers were a lot more interested all of a sudden. And
so you write one blog post, it gets millions of readers, and
and the vultures come crawling. How dare they give me a new career, which I was always wanted. but then that blog post I wrote that informs like the backbone of that final chapter. So it would have been remiss of me not to include it, really, because that was essentially the reason I got into this. But then I guess I didn't know I had this level of ability to talk about such matters, which again I've been complimented so much since, and like nobody else seems to do it like I do it. It's the sense of again growing up with mental health situations, and I think I did the numbers of the day. Like I realize I have more friends with mental health problems than without, and again the only connection is they've all met me at some point. But I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. But it seems to be a thing I do, and I was happy to do it, and I didn't realize it needed doing, but it turns out it did, and I guess that's what I do more than the humorous stuff, as I'm the guy who speaks up for mental health subjects and situations, and it would have been. I guess like the book sort of builds to that. I say it builds up from the fundamentals to the more complex stuff like sensory perception. Memory was the second chapter because that's quite fundamental, but that's also my subject of my PhD. So I'm first and foremost a memory guy. And so I'm happy to talk about that till the cows come home. And then build up to like things like personality, intelligence, humor and things like that. And then, but I think the whole book up to that point is the brain can go wrong. The brain can do things wrong or weirdly or badly. And therefore, it's only a short logical leap to think sometimes it can go too wrong and then stop you functioning. That's where mental health problems come in, mental disorders. And that's a good way to end it, because it sort of softens the reader up nicely to say, well, the brain's going wrong all the time. Some people, it goes slightly more wrong, and we have depression, anxiety, addiction, and things like that. So that was like the sort of overall structure of it, really. So it's a nice sort of a gradual build-up to realize the brain is pretty messy and can mess up many people in very unhelpful ways.
Yeah, and it does, as we know, right? And you talk about, some of the things you write about depression is not logical, and I love what you say as well is about asking somebody, like insisting that someone be logical, who's in the grip of mental illness is like insisting somebody with a broken leg walk normally. And how
that's the whole point.
That it's not. People will say things like, "Oh, just snap out of it," But ultimately, and again, I love this sentence: depression is a genuine and serious problem that deserves empathy and respect, not dismissal and scorn.
Totally fun about that.
Yeah. How did you arrive at this perspective?
Again, it's not something I actively chose to do. I guess it wasn't. It wasn't like I didn't sit down one day thinking I am going to be the mental health guy. I'm going to learn everything about this. It, I guess, like I say, it comes a lot from my background, as in seeing people with little or no purpose in life, or little or no prospects. I guess that's a better way of saying it, because it was a very underfunded, very lower class community. It's essentially been abandoned by the government and society. Most people didn't know we were there. You see a lot of despair. You see a lot of angst and addiction. Obviously, I lived in a pub, so you see plenty of that going around. But these people were my friends. They were my extended family growing up. These are my these are my community. These were my people. So like that's just, they've been my basis of, they are who I calibrated my personality against. Really, we are informed by the people we grow up around. We learn from other people, and our sense of self and identity is based on the ones we interact with, and these are the people I interacted with. So there's a big part of that as well. As in, it's never occurred to me not to be compassionate, considerate, and see people with mental problems as genuine, regular human people, because, well, they are. I mean, that's just a logical statement as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So then you sort of start studying, and then started studying the brain, and then I say when you're aware of just how incredibly complex and messy it is, and how much can and does go wrong in it, it's incredibly, and it's difficult to maintain that perspective and also think, but anyone who's got mental health problems is just attention seeking, because you should know deep down, or not even deep down, just up front and center, that no, the brain is just that unreliable sometimes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, working in a psychiatry program, seeing and teaching others about the various different ways and methods of mental health going wrong, being treated, being diagnosed, being managed, and just how complex and difficult it is to do. And again, it was an online course. It was so distance learning. So we had students from all over the world, some in very remote countries, some with only a limited grasp of English, and some which, and I think anyone who works in a psychiatry or psychology program will tell you, a lot of people who join it, it's a case of physician heal thyself. Like, they have their own problems that they want to deal with, and they want insight into that. So I spent most of my life dealing with people who have or are enduring or open about mental health problems. So it's just, again, these are the people who have made me who I am, and there's no, again, I can't think of any other way I would be. Like, there's no reason to not treat them with the level of compassion you would treat anyone you care about.
Well, I think it's not the norm for everyone, right? And you say, like, I mean, one of the things that you say also in this part of the book is you talk about the line between mental disorder and mentally normal is incredibly fuzzy and indistinct, and often relies on arbitrary decisions based around social norms.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And you give this example, which I didn't know, that it was only in 1973 did the American Psychiatric Association declassify homosexuality as a mental disorder.
Yeah.
Right. So our understanding of what even constitutes a mental disorder, let alone, how we should deal with others who, or, ourselves who are experiencing it is pretty remarkable. But you gave me a new perspective in explaining kind of what I would say, I would use the word, the mechanics of when others kind of dismiss, or blame or shame someone, really as a way of, I guess if I understood what you were saying, right? Like, wanting to believe that could never happen to them.
Yeah. A lot of it is I say, like, people with mental health problems have a brain which isn't, doing them many favors. But the same applies to people who are, judgmental or condemning or stigmatizing of people with mental health issues themselves. Like, we're still talking about brains here. Like, everyone has the brain with the sort of same inherent properties. And one of the properties that brains has, the typical human brain is a very defensive organ. It does everything it can to maintain our sense of well-being, to maintain our our optimism, or make us feel good about ourselves. One of which is something called the attribution bias, in that if you hear about a tragedy, say in a distant country, a Pacific island somewhere, with people whose lives are nothing like yours and look nothing like you, it's fine to say, "Oh, that's terrible. I'll send some money. I'll send some goodwill packages, whatever." You feel bad for them. It's okay to do that. But if it's your neighbor who experiences a bad, something bad, or like his car like backfires, or like he gets broken into, this is someone who lives right next to you, has the same sort of life as you, the same sort of background, the same sort of person, and also especially if someone looks like you as well and has that sort of that thing, that actually that's more unnerving, because it says, like, well, if it happened to them, it could happen to me. So the brain doesn't like that. It doesn't think, well, that's just a threat. That's a genuine angst. That's an anxiety which I don't want, don't need. It's a fear that I can't know anything about. So rather than just live with this constant fear of the same thing happening to you, the brain tries to find explanations or causes which reduce the likelihood it'll happen to you. So rather than my neighbor is an unlucky person. He has just got a bit of bad luck. It's like, see, it's his own fault for leaving the door open, or like he shouldn't have. He should have done more maintenance to his car. I wouldn't do that, so it won't happen to me. So it's like it's a self-defense bias. Same thing with depression. If you see someone who has a similar background to you, or from the same town or country or village or community, or has a similar level of education, or has a lot of things in common with you, and they have depression, then that the obvious conclusion there is, well, I could get depression. I could have this crippling mood disorder. I don't want that's a very uncomfortable fact to have to accept. So the brain goes, well, maybe it is, but unless depression isn't real, they're just attention seeking, or they're lazy. Well, there we go. Then that explains that. That keeps me safe. That's sort of like that's like it's like put your head back under the blankets because you don't want to deal with the monster in the cupboard. And it's basically a lot of time it's the brain's defense mechanism, but because it's so deeply buried and so instinctive, we don't know it's happening. So it's just your brain going, no, we can ignore that because X, Y, Z, it's their fault. And as a result, people get a lot more stigma and judgment and blame than they really deserve.
Yeah, and I think this is, you used a term I'd never heard before about just world, the just world.
The just world hypothesis. This is a big part of that, in that the instinctive assumption that the world is fair, that good actions are rewarded positively and bad actions are punished. I mean, it's not true. I think anyone who looks at the news at any point ever knows that. But it's something we need to believe in order to stay motivated, to stay positive. Because if you wake up, accept that, well, the world is a random place, so our actions are meaningless, and like if I could work hard for 5 years and nothing good will happen, you wouldn't do it. You're like, well, what's the point then? I'll just sit here and drink myself to death. Like that's not a good survival trait for a species. Whereas if you genuinely assume, well, if I get up and work hard, then I'll be rewarded. I will succeed. No, odds are you will. If it's the system's in place to do that, but it's not guaranteed. But it's this underlying assumption that we will be rewarded for things we do right, and will be punished for things we do wrong, and other people will be too. That's sort of like a default assumption in most humans, and there's something we need to keep us engaged in the world. But the fact it's not accurate. It is untrue.
Yeah, it's not accurate, and at some level we know that. Like we've all probably heard our mother say something like "life isn't fair."
Yes.
So at some level, like almost no one would disagree with that. But at the same time, we do seem to live with this just world phenomenon, this just world perspective, thinking, well, if something bad has happened to someone, they must deserve it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And also it's it works two ways. If someone is very wealthy, very rich, very powerful, we assume, well, they must warrant that sort of thing, because otherwise they got there just by luck and circumstance and cheating, and that's a horrible thing to think of, even though it's demonstrably true. But so like it's a deeply embedded sort of cognitive bias we have, which seems to be quite persistent. And it's just like facing up to it, owning up to it is a way of moving forward through it, or a way of overcoming it. But a lot of the time, people don't realize they need to do that because it's deeply buried. Yeah. And therefore people with mental health problems get stigmatized and attacked when they shouldn't, because it's easier and safer and more reassuring to blame them than to accept the fact that sometimes people just have really bad luck.
Yeah, and that could happen to me.
Exactly, yes.
Exactly, yeah, totally. And I really appreciate as well that there are so many places in the book that help really kind of shine a light on and bring an awareness to these, I don't want to call them tricks, but these ways in which the brain works that are very egocentric, that we're not aware of unless they're pointed out to us, but, research, or in some cases, even common sense, once we see it, like the one that you talk about where people, when they recall a decision that was made that they were a part of, when it turns out favorably, they remember having had a bigger role in it than they actually had.
Yeah.
Right? Like the fact that things like that happen, is there a specific name for that, or that kind of bias?
I think that's the retroactive bias. It's a self-aggrandizing one. It's like egocentric. There are so many different egocentric biases to memory. We always remember things being better for us than they were. We remember doing better than we did because human memory is very plastic. It can be edited and updated and tweaked every time we recall it. Recalling memory isn't just looking at a file. It's triggering it again, and you add in your new perspective to it, and so there's a lot of that covered as well. Yeah, I think it's the retroactive bias. I think I mentioned, but it first sort of identified in relation to the Watergate scandal, the whistleblower John Dean, my namesake of mine, like not one of the better Deans, I guess, but he was involved in it, and he came forward and sort of confessed that all this was going on. But as the recording shows, that he said, well, we had this meeting and I did this, blah, 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 blah. And he's just saying like all the stuff he did to get this conspiracy going. But then they found the recordings, the actual meetings, and they didn't match his memory. He was far more of a bit player. He was just in the background taking notes or making the occasional suggestion. He wasn't making big decisions or guiding the conversation or leading the planning like he said he was. Like, the gist of what happened was correct, but his role in it was far more expanded in his memory. Yeah. And you have to look at the fact that he's confessing to a crime here. He doesn't want to. He wouldn't like just make himself look like a big man. He doesn't want to get any more punishment than he's already had. Just his memory told him, this is an important thing that happened. You were involved with it. So, there's some ambiguity to play with there. Let's just, you were a big person. You did well there. You did that. You're an important person. And when the actual physical recording came forward, like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
But, the brain does that to us. Like, we need to feel good about ourselves in order to function to a certain extent. That's why depression can be so crippling, because we don't. It sort of becomes inverted.
Yeah.
And, yes, but and it does this in many ways by tweaking our memories. So we always have a bit of a slightly more rosy version of our actions, and that is actually the case.
Yeah, or sometimes maybe the inverse, where we remember something as worse, like catastrophizing, right?
Yes, definitely.
But always in a way that makes us look good.
Yeah, but it's because obviously it sounds like I'm criticizing the brain here, but we have to think in that every bit of information the brain has is derived from an egocentric perspective. Like it's all run through our own eyes, through our own ears, through our own heads. So everything we've experienced ever is always going to be from our own perspective. So our own influence on it is going to be far more magnified than a sort of a CCTV camera would pick up, because it's our own brain recording it. So
okay, just a few more questions on this before we switch gears here. So I'm curious to ask you about personality.
Okay,
because you write about this and you quote this Jerry Ferris and William Chaplin. They wrote a book in 2009 called Introduction to Personality. Looks like a textbook. That they use this definition that you say most psychologists would be willing to accept. And here it is. You say, personality is that pattern of characteristic thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that distinguishes one person from another and that persists over time and situations.
Yeah, I think that that's a fairly reasonable summary of personality.
Yeah. So given that, because one of the things that some of my teachers and my spiritual teachers suggest to me is that our personality is entirely a construct. That they say, in the same way your body is made of food, the mind and the personality is an accumulation of beliefs and experiences, and it's not who you really are. And I know that gets into the realm of metaphysics and spirituality, but the point that I'm left with, and that I attempt to share with others when I think it will serve them, is that we actually can change. Not just change as human beings, but we can change even our personality.
Yeah.
What do you say? True or false, Dean?
Yeah, I would say definitely true. In that we change all the time. Every memory we have, every experience we have informs our identity, and we have what they call like a mental model of how the world works running in our head all the time. Like this is the sum of our experiences, our beliefs, our views, our predictions, our memories, our tendencies. These are all like inserted into one big amalgamation, which is like a simulation of things, which helps us navigate life. Is in like this, in this situation, this should happen. In this context, I would do this. In this context, they would do that. I would do this. So that's it's an ongoing thing. It's always been added to, always been expanded, and people do change. We see them all the time. I think personality endures over time. So like there's a sort of a core amalgamation of specifics, which most people would think, well, I'm that sort of person. Like some people don't like a certain type of music. Some people are very sort of disinterested in like modern art and things like that. Some people don't get along with a certain type of person, like a particularly gregarious person they can find quite annoying, or they can love people like that. So these are traits which are enduring, but I don't think enduring means fixed or permanent. You can change these things, but I think that's the sort of stuff which takes effort. So if you don't like, extroverted people, you think, well, I want to start liking extroverted people. You're going to have to sort of force yourself to engage with them more. And hopefully over time, you'll if not start liking them, you become desensitized. Oh, I'm used to that now. So,
yeah. And I wonder, and this is at the heart of this, by the way, for me. And I'm so glad that you're talking about this, because to hear that, and I know that's a common perspective, and it's not that I disagree with it. But what I'm hearing you say is something along the lines of, I know this isn't therapy, and we're talking that way, but almost like exposure therapy. That if you don't like this kind of person, just be exposed to it. And eventually, if maybe you'll come to like it, but at least you'll become inured to it. You'll be able to tolerate it. But what I wonder is it a choice? Can it be, I make the decision and boom, my experience changes and my personality even can change in a profound and real way from a decision without there having to be exposure or time?
I would say, I think it can be a choice to, if you wake up and want to say, right, I'm going to make myself like this type of people I've always had problems with, then that's a decision. Now, if you were someone like in the past week, like, oh, I hate those guys, I'm going to give them a wide berth. Yeah. But then I guess it depends on how far back you want to sort of go here, and then we come back to the whole issue of is free will real or not, and I've been over that already. Yeah. But it's like, if you wake up, if you decide, right, I'm going to make myself like these people, and but then that means you are the sort of person who will make that decision, who actually wants to decide that. And other people wouldn't. Other people are quite comfortable in their current existence. So, but then are you like them or are you not? Or was that always part of you? I think that's where it becomes, that's where we enter the realms of, what is individual choice? What is, free will? What are decisions? Like, what are the factors which led to me making this decision to, enact this fundamental change? And I think these are really good and interesting questions, and they're one of the things which we just don't know yet, I guess. Like one of the mysteries, like I keep bumping up against, is human consciousness. Human brain is a massive amalgamation of billions of neurons, like thousands of different dedicated areas, all working at the same time in sort of chaotic ways. How does that suddenly produce this one unified consciousness that we have? I don't know.
Or does it?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. So, but we do seem to act as an individual, and why would it sort of merge in this way at all? And that's a good question. That's one thing which we can't really say yet. And
I truly was just about to ask you about that. So thank you for bringing it up. Yeah,
seems spontaneous, doesn't it? Yeah. But these are the big questions. These are the the human existence, what is our purpose sort of style questions, I would say, like, why are we here? What do we do here? What are we? These are big questions. These are important questions. Yeah. But again, I think it comes back to the fact that I've never had that much of a high opinion of myself to be able to address stuff like this. I'll explain the nuts and bolts. I'll let the big thinkers take care of the heavy lifting on the philosophical side. Mm-hmm. So, but I think it's an interesting one in that you can decide to make a change about yourself, but if you've made that decision, then were you already that sort of person? Like, but because people change. Identity is fluid, or memory is fluid. Personality is a lot more chaotic than we think. And again, I think I mentioned in the book how reluctant I was to even write that chapter because it's so hard to study. Yeah, there are lots of scientific papers about personality, but the problem is because it's science, it has to be measurable, objective. It can only be on external properties of personality, stuff people behave and do and say. Right. So much of who we are is internal, just our internal thoughts, our internal monologue, and the stuff we believe and don't tell anyone. These are just as vital parts, and you just can't see those things, and people don't often share them. So so there's still a lot to go on there.
No, and what you say makes sense to me, and I think about, and at the same time, I think about, people that I work with in a coaching capacity, or just stories people have told me from their life, where an incident occurred, usually in their youth, and they made a decision to be a certain way or to never be a certain way, to be healthy, and then they became like a star athlete. They carried that impulse out so far, or to be, top of their class, and then they always earned, straight A's. And it was like from one time in a classroom when a teacher shamed them in front of their peers, and boom, it was like from that moment they lived as a certain person, so I've seen it, and I realize, these are anecdotes, that kind of thing. But still, I like to believe that power is available to us to self-determine, at any moment.
Definitely. But I think definitely, but it normally, like you say, those examples, it does suggest it takes a sort of an event or an external factor to enforce such a change. Because if you are comfortable, if people stay in their comfort zone, that is pretty much like we do that just by default. It's
every organism, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is safe. I like this. I know what I'm doing. Why change that?
Yeah.
Something shows you that, well, this isn't safe. Like, this is not a guaranteed safe way to be. Oh, like, I better do something different then. Like, I'm going to say, I'm fine coastline in class, teacher humiliates you. I'm not going to let that happen again. So, so that would be a decision. But then it's external factors which can enforce it or sort of like trigger it. It could just be, could just wake up one day and thought, I'm not happy with this. I'm just going to do it. But so people are malleable, and that's one of the best parts of the brain, I think. Nobody's fixed in place.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
Yes,
that's great.
Really helpful.
Okay. So I want to turn our conversation now to the, last question in this section, if you're good. Mm-hmm. Do you mind if I ask a somewhat personal question?
Right on, yeah.
So the question is about a belief in a higher power, and about how, if at all, what you've learned about the brain, about life, like how it has changed, if it has, your belief in, or maybe a relationship to, a higher power.
It's a very tricky one in that I never really had much in the way of religious influence growing up. Like, it's a very small community. My parents weren't religious at all. I was christened, or like baptized, the Church of England version. I remember that because I was about 5. So I remember it being a strange experience. Like, why is everyone staring at me? Why is my head wet? And that's always, it's a strange thing to put a 5-year-old through. So like, I remember that being a thing, that sort of religion and stuff, and like mentions of God being it, but it was never really, we weren't really led to make it a part of our existence. Like, it wasn't like we had like prayers in school and stuff, and I guess I believed in God and Jesus growing up in the same way. Like, well, I was told that was a thing, so of course, I didn't have reason to doubt it. But yeah, it was never sort of like a deep-rooted religious thing. I think our village went from, my mother told us, said the churches were all Welsh Baptist at one point, and then they were Church of England, and nobody told anyone, and it just happened. So it's okay, fair enough. But like, it was like, all right, crack on. So it wasn't like a major wrench in like the spiritual life of the valley that I grew up in. So yeah, so belief and work and adherence to a higher power has always been a sort of a rather smaller part of my life compared to a lot of people in the world I know. But it's not, I guess I wouldn't call myself an atheist. I suppose I would call myself, like, if I invent my own term, a non-atheist. Like, is it like, I think, like I said earlier, like the whole philosophical, spiritual stuff, I think, well, that's not really my field. I'll happily let other people talk about that. And if you want to ask me stuff, I'll say what I think about it. But I don't think it's not my area. So it's not something I don't feel an absence in my life from, not having a deep connection to a higher power or a religious background or anything. But I don't feel like I miss out on much in that respect. I think I'm happy and perfectly functional as I am, I'd like to think. So, yeah, so it's an interesting one that, I've thought about it, well, why am I so ambivalent about it, I guess. And when you sort of study the brain and stuff, and you see the innate messiness and like inefficiency, it's all better with it. It's kind of it's difficult to say this was designed by a maximum intelligence or like the ultimate being, because like could have done a better job than this if they were that powerful. So it does sort of like okay. But I don't think that's necessary. Like I mock the brain a lot, and I sort of talk about funny. But I personally find that's more impressive. It is a messy, tangled, convoluted organ, and it still does all the stuff it does. It's still got us to where we are. That to me is breathtakingly impressive, far more than brilliant thing does brilliant stuff. Of course it does, but no, messy, inefficient, clogged up thing does brilliant stuff. That's more of an achievement. So I don't really have much of a. That's not a big part of my life, I guess. If I had to summarize it, it never really has been. So I've never felt the lack of it. If I had a more of a religious upbringing and like, becoming a neuroscientist, how would that affect me then? It's an interesting question, but it's more of a thought experiment. It hasn't happened, so I haven't got any data to go on. But I do know plenty of very accomplished scientists who are very religious, and like someone like a local professor who sets up his own evolution research institutions, and he's a devout Christian. He goes to church every week and things, so he sees no incompatibility there. So I don't think there's this divide that people always seem to assume there is. I mean, most of the famous scientists throughout history were also very devout, because for a long time, like, it was the church which was actually teaching people how to do science and things like that. So there wasn't any other institution for it. So it's a lot more give between spirituality and science than most people seem to realize. I think the shouted matches are more of the fringy things, but yeah, it's not something I've really ever had to dwell on that much, I suppose. So I can't really give you a satisfying answer there.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So the enlightening lightning round. In this section, these are designed to be short questions. You're welcome, of course, to answer as long as you want, but my aim is to ask the question and, for the most part, to stay out of it.
Okay.
So, okay. Question number 1. Please complete the following sentence with something other than a box of chocolates.
Okay.
Life is like a...
I would say it's like a choose your own adventure story. Like, it seems like there are set paths. It seems like there are structured narratives to it. And in a way there are, perhaps, you fall into certain pathways and routes, but there are still the choices you need to make. And they can be quite like innocuous ones which lead to much bigger things, or they can be quite fundamental ones which don't really lead to much change at all. But yeah, but then a book is still a construct of humans. So the life and world we have created is like it's our own thing. It's we have designed this world, and it's ours. It is what it is because of humans, and I think we need to sort of perhaps recognize that a bit more. Like, life is what we've made it, for better or worse, and it is what we make it, for better or worse.
Right on. Thank you. Question number 2. What's something at which you wish you were better?
Oh, music, definitely. I like music in the same way I like wine, in that I recognize white and red. I can tell like a bad one from a good one, but beyond that, I have no finesse. I have no precision. I know some people who can sip a glass of red wine and say, "Oh yes, from the Bordeaux region of France, 1963, the grapes were stomped by a young boy called Pascal, with a corn on his left toe," like that sort of. I've never. I know loads of people who love music so much and are very moved by it. They have their favorite albums from their youth, and they have like a deep emotional experiences relating to it. And I don't know, just always had a bit of a blind spot, a bit of a sort of a very crude appreciation of it. Like, I like the stuff I like. I don't like the stuff I don't like. But there's nothing. It doesn't really go that much deeper. Where some people they can sit and listen to an album and feel like a full immersive emotional experience. And my interest in music is more casual, and I'd love to be able to do it. But it's just something that's, again, I don't think I'm wired that way, and I don't know why. Most of my family are, but I'll accept it. I've made up for it in other areas, I think. But it's always been a thing I've sort of. I feel the absence of that sometimes. Like, I wish I could do something. I wish I could be a more musical person, but it is what it is.
Okay. I wish I was more musical myself. Yeah. Question number 3. If you were required every day for the rest of your life to wear a T-shirt with a slogan on it, or a phrase, or a saying, or a quote, or a quip, what would the shirt say?
My first thought was go to my favorite comedy writers, but they're pretty much all sweary, so I wouldn't want to wear that. It'd make it difficult to pick the kids up from school. Tricky one. I think with weirdly, I've always really liked just the phrase "action potential," because that's the name of like the signals that neurons conduct to each other, just like the little shift in membrane potential. And I like that as it sounds motivational, like action potential, like the potential to do action.
Yeah,
it's like, but it is the thing that the brain and life itself is based on. So I think I'd like to show it just as action potential, because I think it opens up a lot of, there's a lot of scope there for what that covers. So it'll just say action potential, and the A would be shaped like the voltage change. It says action.
I love it. No, that's great. And okay, so this is a moment.
I might sell that.
So, I love that. And you probably start some interesting conversations with that shirt too. Yeah. And I do want to jump in and violate my own lightning round rule for a moment, because this is something I did want to ask you about. I was first exposed to an idea that might be the same idea, where I heard the term readiness potential. And I wonder if it's the same in neuroscience, readiness potential and action potential, but the context in which I heard it was that scientists have been able to measure, and I'm not sure I'm going to relate this accurately, but that we're able to detect in a few milliseconds before someone takes an action that they are going to take that action before they're even consciously aware, which maybe just muddies that whole free will thing. But is that something that you can speak about?
To a certain extent, there's a lot of research in this sort of area, like the thing of mirror neurons, which sort of are the neurons which respond to the actions of others, and they seem to be quite fundamental, and like they are believed to be. I don't think they've been identified specific neurons in humans yet. They've been found in other species, but we seem to have a mirror sort of center, which is a bit more pluripotential. Which it's a big part of empathy. Like there was someone. Their facial expression changes this way. We are so sensitive to that. We can go, oh, angry person, frustrated person, oh, what's wrong? And like it's a weird thing too. You walk into a room where a row has just happened or a big argument. You can sense it, people's body language, people's tension, the way they stand. We are such a social species that so much of the brain is actually dedicated to detecting and communicating and reading other people. And we have all centers for it. Like we have a face recognition zone in the brain, like the visual cortex, which that's why we see like the face of Jesus or Elvis and toast and chips all the time. It's we recognize faces so readily, like based on little information. So it wouldn't. I think that there is that there. It's like the brain finds such things, other people's actions and demeanor, so important that it tags them like immediately before our conscious mind can even recognize it or like be aware that it's happening. A lot of stuff does do that. Like the conscious mind is far more complex and has more potential than the instinctive stuff. The instinctive stuff, being simpler and older, is a lot faster because it's like point A to point B to point C, there, done. Whereas the conscious mind, all the different connections, it's like going through the entire metro system of a big city. Like, there it is, and that's So it's a known thing that the subconscious processes happen a lot faster than the conscious ones because they're just simpler and they have more direct routes.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And some of what you write about that with the measurements when we see something, I think the number you used was for 1/300th of a second when subjects are exposed to an image and already they start to sweat. Or
the fear responses are just like incredibly fast and
it's amazing.
Very much a hair trigger, even a body hair trigger. Of course, at the rise.
So tangent over. We'll go back. Okay, question number 4. What book, other than one of your own, have you gifted or recommended most often?
I think it would be Sam Keen's The Tale of the Dueling Neurosurgeons, because it's...
What a great title.
I know. I thought, well, that's why I wanted it in the first place. I go, well, I got to read that just by sheer interest. It's all like a history of neuroscience, and it starts from like the very early days of battlefield medics in medieval times. They're looking at the caving in skulls of people and poking the brain bits, and it's a very intriguing and very colourful history of my field. And it's kind of it's a very squishy one. Let's just go to say that it's before MRAs came along, you had to wait for someone to have a brain injury and see what happened. And I hope most of my scientist ancestors waited, because some of them aren't the most moral people I know. So that's the one I sort of recommend for just if you know how neuroscience came about. It's by no means a boring subject in that respect.
Yeah, sounds fascinating. Okay, question number 5. So you've traveled quite a bit. What's one travel hack, meaning something you do or something you take with you when you travel to make your travel less painful or more enjoyable?
The obvious answer there would be my wife, because I was never much of a traveller before we met. So I grew up in this tiny remote valley, and they say you should expand your horizons, obviously. But when your horizons on mountains like 3 miles apart, it doesn't take a lot to expand them. So I still live now only 30 miles away from my hometown, and geographically it's not much, but psychologically it was like going to the moon. It's like you can't go live in a city. That's not done. No one does that. Obviously they do, most of humanity, but my friends and peers went to know that at the time. But I guess because all my travel experiences done via my wife, who was an enthusiastic traveller before we met. So I've travelled long haul. We've been to Mexico, Malaysia, Turkey, and Egypt, places like a bit more exotic, but rather than the package holidays to the nearest sunny place. I guess, I think I will say it is, when you're traveling, if you can, it's important to go with someone you have that connection with. It's someone you can, with presence you can tolerate, you want to be around. Because people like to play, let's go on holiday together. And that's when you get to really know someone, I suppose, in that, I went traveling with some friends when I was younger, didn't really enjoy it. They turned out like when they're off the leash, they aren't the most sociable or considerate people. So I think if you are going to go traveling, my only advice would be travel with someone you like and travel with someone you get on with. And I think beyond that, that'll always make things less stressful, just because you have someone you can rely on.
Yeah, no, that's well said. Okay, number 6. What's one thing you've started or stopped doing in order to live or age well?
I guess you could say I stopped doing the stand-up comedy to a certain extent. I mean, it was never it's never something I pursued as a career. I've never thought I was that good. But I guess I toyed with the idea for a bit. I've been doing it for about a year. So could I do this? But I didn't think I was right for it. It's too unpredictable a lifestyle for me. I was already married. Wanted to settle down. I wanted a family eventually. I wanted to find a reliable job, and it would. If I wanted to do a comedian in this country, at least, I'm pretty sure it's the same elsewhere. That it's a highly sought after profession. There are far more comedians who want to do it than comedians who earn a living from it, and it's a very lonely profession. You drive in all hours to go to gigs. I went with a friend once to do a gig in Grantham, which is like 4 hours drive there, 4 hours back. So drove 4 hours. I did 7 minutes. He did 20. So 4 hours back. I mean, that seemed like, I guess my rational mind just couldn't accept this ridiculous existence.
Yeah.
Just do like this seems so inefficient, and so let alone the environmental impact of driving 4 hours for a 10-minute slot. But it sort of got to the point where I didn't need to be doing it. Like I do book talks now, so I want some stage time. I get an hour to myself at literary festivals, and I want to tell jokes I can. So I never officially quit it, but because I was never officially doing it, I suppose it was always a hobby. But it's something I've pulled back from, and I do think, like most things, especially when it's something so ego-driven and competitive, there's a lot of ill will there. Like there's a lot of toxic people you could end up talking to, or if you want to schmooze and network with people who are higher up the rankings, and it becomes very cynical. And I just never enjoyed that. It just stresses me out doing it, so I stopped. So yeah, I guess technically doing stand-up comedy, although I will do it now and again, but it's very much more of a casual pastime than it once was.
All right. Thank you. So here's an ethnocentric question. What's one thing you wish every American knew?
Well, I guess where to buy my book and how cheap it is, I suppose. That would be handy. I don't know. I guess it would be just try and get my perspective on depression more widespread. That it's not just a depression, any mental disorder. Like a mental disorder stops you from thinking logically and rationally, or at least to it by a normal extent, and that's why it's genuinely harmful and unhelpful to expect people in the grips with to do that. So yeah, so you shouldn't judge people in the grips with a mental health problem by normal standards, because by definition they are not operating in those parameters. So yeah, that would be if I could get everyone to recognize that, I think we'd make some headway in dealing with these problems in a more helpful manner.
Yeah, we'd be better for it, for sure. Okay, the next question. What's the most important or useful advice you've ever... I'm going to reword this question. What's the most useful thing you've ever learned about making relationships work?
I personally, with the caveat that everyone is different, everyone has their own priorities, everyone has different personalities, and what works for some people won't work for everyone else, and relationships are inherently complex because they're a two-way thing. I think it's that it really is, I think, people seem to think it's to be avoided, but I think the opposite. It's really good to find someone or to work as a relationship where you can be silent with someone. You can just sit there in the same place at the same time and not be not a hostile, like I'm not talking to you, I refuse to speak to you.
Yeah.
But to be in the same place, just be around someone and not, have to fill the silence with, just to accept that just because you're not talking right now doesn't mean there's something wrong. It's like the idea, because me and my wife do this. Me and my wife will sit there, we'll just read in the same room. We'll sit there, like, she'll use a computer, I'll just use my phone, or we'll write something. It's companionable. It's just nice to be around someone. It's nice to be able to say, hello, you're there. That's nice. I'm glad you're nearby. And it doesn't need to be more than that. I think it's the idea that you can sit in silence is, people find like, well, something must be wrong. You're not talking, you're communicating. Like, it's fine. Humans don't communicate 24/7. You need some downtime. And if you can share that downtime with someone else, then that's even better. I think that makes a relationship stronger, not less so. Yeah. So that would be my personal take on it. Yeah.
No, that really resonates with me. And I have that kind of relationship with my wife. In fact, she says, a few years into being together, she said, being with you is like being by myself, only better.
Yeah, that's great though, isn't it? It's nice to be able to say that, because, like, I think it's my second book, but people are very social creatures, but even the most gregarious extroverts, they need some downtime. They need socializing and interacting takes energy and resources for the brain, and you need to stop doing that sometimes. But if you can do that in a very passive way with someone, like, just someone, that's best of both worlds. You get to recharge, you get to recover, and you get to the companionship, and it's just great. Yeah, I think that's a really good approach.
Okay, so last question in this section, which is, what's the most important thing aside from compound interest, setting aside compound interest, what's the most important lesson you've ever learned about money, or what's something that you're sure to always do or never do with it?
I guess, well, when I first moved out from home, I was a student. I had the student loan, and I didn't quite, I didn't quite appreciate how money is a finite resource. Like, I've got money now, I can buy stuff, and again, once again, I credit my wife with this, because she's from a far more financially sensible background, and her parents owned a business. Like, they were doing a recession, so they're very much good at watching money, but she's not like stingy, just very logical, very thinking about it. And I guess for me, it's a case of, I now, thanks to her and also thanks to my previous experiences, where I got into debt, but I got out of it again, thankfully, I don't like spending money that I don't need to spend, in terms of, if I want something, I think, that'll make my life a bit better. I've got money, I can afford that. I'll get that. But, like, I've got a phone right now. It's not the latest model. I don't care. It works. It's exactly what I needed to do. I don't need the latest iPhone. I've never had an iPhone. I've always had a Galaxy, purely because that was what my contract offered. All right, I love that, and I haven't changed since, because I don't need to. I don't see any requirement for that. I don't have the latest fashion. I will wear shoes until they are not useful anymore, like they stop working. Yeah, so I think I don't buy things. I just don't for the sake of it. I don't like doing that. No, I think my wife's taught me that, but also for a few months of living like paycheck to paycheck, because I lost too much money just by being an irresponsible student. Yeah, I don't like needless expenses, and like I don't have any particular drive to keep up with the Joneses or have the best of everything. And I guess because I'm just very easily contented right now. I will happily just put, well, I've got this much money, I can spend a bit of it on something nice to eat, and then I'll just put the rest away, because that's all I need to do right now. So yeah, I think it's a case of not spending money that I don't need to spend is perhaps the most useful thing I've done. But again, with the advantage of, as like I said, the music thing, I've never really been stimulated by things like gambling or like, I don't get a high from shopping. Like I find it a tedious chore. So again, I guess I have an innate bias away from that sort of behavior anyway. But yeah, just I don't spend money I don't need to spend, because why would I suppose?
Yeah. What a beautiful way to be.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so if you're up for it, I would like to just ask a few questions about the creative process and about writing.
Yeah, if I can answer them, I will.
Yep. Okay, and then before we go to that and the final section of our interview here today, I want to ask this here to make sure to get it in the interview and not squeeze it to the end. If people want to learn more from you, or they want to connect with you or follow you, what would you have them do?
You can go to deanburnett.com, my website. If you're a Twitter user, it's at Garrowboy, Garwboy. The Garrow Valley is my home valley. I actually signed up to Twitter long before anyone cared who I was, so I didn't think it would be an issue. But now I've got like close to 40,000 followers who keep asking, "What's that mean?" I say, "All right, fine." So on like Facebook, my professional account is Dean Burnett Writing Person. But you can see my the Cosmic Shambles Network has my blog Brain Yapping, and my podcast also called Brain Yapping. These are the places you can find me. But also, if anyone wants to, you can find my books, which I have 4 of out now, and the 5th on the way. So there's there's Happy Brain, Idiot Brain. 2 are now currently on in the UK. One is Why Your Parents Are Driving You Up the Wall and What to Do About It. My first book for teens about why their parents are annoying, all to do with brain development and so on. And my newest book, Psychological. It's an audio exclusive from Audible. You can get it if you want, but it covers pretty much everything we discussed about the mental health side of things. It's a book all about that, like a real deep dive into depression, anxiety, and the current state of mental health with my own signature analogies and easily explained way. So yeah, these are all, if you're interested in anything I do, those are the places to go, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And on the topic of thank you, one of the things that I've done to express my gratitude to you for making time and to share of your experience and wisdom with me and all of our listeners is that I've made $100 microloan to an entrepreneur in India on your behalf. Someone named Devika, who's in Tamil Nadu. She's 47 years old. She'll use this money to buy rice and expand her batter selling business.
Thank you. That's marvelous.
So thank you for giving me a reason to do that.
Great. Thank you for doing that. I mean, that wasn't. I don't know what part I played in that, but I'll happily take the credit.
Okay, cool. So final questions here. So Dean, you've now written. You said you've got your 5th book coming out. Your first book, I understand, was published in 2016. Mm-hmm. So that's like 5 books in less than 5 years.
Yeah, 3 with this year. So
wow,
that was a bit much. Yeah, that was unwise. Don't let me think that was like, I'm just that good. No, that was a terrible idea.
No, but here we are. Amazing. Very, very prolific. And I love the story you shared a little earlier about, you started blogging and an agent found you and asked if you wanted to write a book. I suppose the question that I want to ask here is, if people want to do what you're doing, meaning they want to take their ideas, they want to organize them, they want to write them, they want to share them with other people in a way that people enjoy and it actually makes a difference for, what advice or insight would you give to people who want to do that?
The advice I generally give when asked questions a bit like this is going to be kind of egocentric, because obviously it's based on my own experience and I've got nothing really else to go on. But it would be to start blogging, or start, like say, if it's more of a live thing, if you can do it live, start doing it. It's more a case of getting your work out there, like put it out there so people can see it, and then that sort of becomes almost a self-sustaining sort of thing. Like even if it's like 4 or 5 people read it the first time, because if you're a completely unknown blogger, writer, then it won't be especially popular to begin with. But that's good, isn't it? You can see it all work there. You can see how you're progressing. You can just go back to the stuff you did before. Like, oh, what was I thinking? And that's helpful, But other people can see that too, and that makes you maintain a sense of honesty, or transparency, I suppose. And that some people might not like to do that. You can go back and get rid of your work if you want to. But in terms of the purely practical sense, like doing that gives you the opportunity for people to see what you're doing, especially if you work on or address a particularly niche area or something people are interested in. And that's another tip, I suppose, in that, what do you offer that other people or most people couldn't or don't? It doesn't have to be completely original, but, as in, if you're something, a particular niche area of music, or you have a particular type of art, then, you can offer that, which other people maybe may not do so. And I got contacted once ages ago, when I was still doing the Guardian stuff, by a guy who wanted to know how we can make his blog go bigger, like mine did. And he sent me links to it, and it was basically, his blog was about being a new father to a 4-year-old boy in the north of England, which is like, it wasn't badly written, but like, I'm not sure that's a unique perspective. There are countless parenting blogs alone, perhaps the most common type, because, well, they would be, wouldn't they? Like, everyone has parents, and so it wasn't really a unique thing to do. So work out what it is that you can offer that most people can't or don't or won't, and then get it out there. And purely because it'll help you grow, it'll help you write, especially if you set yourself the task of, I need to maintain this, I need to keep it going. And I guess if it fades away, then that does sort of suggest that it's not something unless it was because your work is too demanding or you're just doing all the time, then it's just, maybe it isn't something you really want to be doing. It's, if you keep doing it and keep at it, then that suggests it is genuinely a passion of yours. But when you sort of go in the pure practical sense of, if you want to write books or you want to get your work properly out there with the backing of sort of a bigger media platform or corporation, it really helps to have the ability to say, that's what I do. To be able to point to something and say, look, that's what I do. Mm-hmm. What do you think? They might not want it, they might not care for it, but it's there. So if you could approach someone and say, I want to write about the life cycle development of the nematode worm, and they say, okay, what have you written about that? Nothing. I just think I'd be good at it. People aren't interested because you're an unproven entity. If you have your work out there, then at least you can always say, this is what I've done. This is my portfolio. This is my bibliography. This is my stuff. So it's a get it out there in whatever capacity. Then you can point to it and say, that's me. That's what I do. And, that lays the first brick in the foundation of wherever you want to go. So that's always my first advice to people wanting to do similar things to me, I guess.
Yeah, that's solid. When it comes to any given project, I guess the question is, what is a typical day for you like when you're in the middle of a project?
Well, I have my what I am right now, actually, my writing shed, my writing cabin in my garden, much like Roald Dahl had or Dylan Thomas, but mine's better because it's got Wi-Fi, as I said.
I've always wanted one of those.
Yeah,
that's so awesome.
I have a lot of envy directed at me. It's pretty cool. So it's I leave the house at say about 9:20 when I've got the kids to school and everything like that, and I just tend to sit here and write. I suppose I will break up the day if I can. I'll go to the gym or something, or I'll go for a coffee down the road, or I'll walk it. And it's, I think if I'm in the middle of a project, especially, like I think like most people, like it's something I cover in the book. I think I tend to write more prolifically and more fluidly when I'm closer to a deadline.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? But I have become more disciplined over time because, like I say, I never really planned to be a writer, so I had to figure out my system as I went along. My first book was quite nice. I could write in the evenings because we had one. My son was like a year old. My wife's on maternity leave. I had like a little upstairs office. It was really nice. And then my daughter came along. We spent like an hour or two taking the kids to bed, and now by which point I'm exhausted. So so my routine shifts around a lot. But yeah, it's mostly sitting down and writing, I guess. And I do the social media stuff in the morning to keep myself active, to say like, I'm still here, guys, that sort of stuff. But if I'm writing, I will lock those out because there's always something to do with those sort of things. Like I have a large Twitter following, I have a large Facebook presence. And it does technically count as work, so I have to lock them out from my computer completely with those blocking softwares.
You don't just have the self-discipline to mentally turn that off, and
I honestly, really, I can do it when if I'm properly engrossed in something. And I'm like, oh, this is the job I want right now, and I'll not check social media for like a day, 2 days. But I need to be in that zone, and it's hard to get in that zone when I'm constantly distracted by those things. So,
sure. What software do you use to lock yourself out?
What I call it is cold turkey. It just cuts you off completely. So
that's the name of it, cold turkey.
Yeah. I think in order to shut it off, you have to uninstall it. So you have to just wait it out.
Wow.
So yes, I recommend it. It works quite well for me, at least.
Right on. And with your writing, what rituals, if any, do you have? Brew a cup of tea, wear a certain robe?
Good question. I'm not a superstitious sort, I guess, but if I want to really sort of have a session, I will. I got a coffee machine in my cabin, like one of those pots. I don't drink a lot of coffee, actually. I'm always more of a tea guy, British. But if I think like, well, if I think I got to do this now, I'll put the coffee pot on. So that means I got to stay in here and drink it, and that sort of keeps me at my desk and keeps me at it. And also the caffeine gives you that sort of accelerated edge. Sometimes I just look at the next day and go, that's all gibberish, and just delete it. But because the caffeine hits me pretty hard. But I don't really have any specific rituals. I guess the closest I can think of is like I'm in my sort of office cabin in the garden. I'll pull the blinds down if I really want to focus, because I have windows. Like, look out, it's nice to see the grass and outside world, but sometimes even like the world itself is distracting. And now, if I lock myself in here, then I know I'm right. It becomes more office-like. It becomes more austere, and then you sort of get that sort of that mind state to work a bit easier. Yeah. So it's little bits and bobs here and there. I don't have any particular rituals, but I have my own way of doing things, which I seem to have gravitated into.
Yeah, and they work. What about music? You write with a soundtrack, with any music in the background, or no?
Yeah, actually, I used to have like a Spotify playlist of just music I generally liked. And I said about I don't have a great appreciation for music, and I feel really bad for the Spotify algorithm trying to give me suggested songs. Like, they must be so baffled right now. What is this guy even like? What are you? I do the same with my web history, because I do comedy and neuroscience stuff. Like the algorithms trying to sell me stuff. They just get so confused sometimes. I get adverts saying toilet roll, it's like 50 toilet rolls for £10. Like, you must excrete. All we know is you're human, and we're not even sure about that. So, because my search history is so eclectic. But yeah, I think if I'm particularly focused, I often just forget to put the music on. But then it becomes a little bit creepy when you're outside in the garden, like just the silence. So I'll have some classical on, because anything with lyrics I find too distracting. I think because obviously your brain is wired to detect speech, and like, that I find it just too disruptive to what I'm trying to do. So a bit of classical, like nothing specific, just like easy listening classical, or like if you look on Spotify, you get write-in playlists and stuff. And now my friend introduced me to the lo-fi hip-hop YouTube channels, which just have that sort of nice background noise thing, or even like the easy, the cafe ambient noise background stuff. I actually wrote an article about this a while ago for The Guardian. Apparently, according to studies, the best music for focusing is video game soundtracks, video game music, because almost by accident, this is music which has been designed to be stimulating without distracting, because obviously it's not meant to be. You're playing a video game, you need to your focus, but it's something which draws you in but doesn't throw you off. And the designers of video game music have almost incidentally created the perfect study music, because it's because that's what they like. That's what its purpose is. And but I don't listen to music. I don't listen to video game soundtracks myself, because I know that fact. So I'll just I'll keep distracting myself with thinking this is from a video game.
Yeah,
and that's not useful, I suppose. You're trying to write about the fundamentals of anger processing in the hippocampus and so on.
That's interesting. I could totally see that. Who has been influential in your development as a writer, and what have you learned from them?
It's a bit of a tricky one, because I'm not really a huge fan of the concept of role models, in that I get why people like them, I get why people have them, but I've always been a little bit sort of, again, knowing neuroscience as I do and stuff, and even as a kid growing up, I didn't, because I was so atypical of everyone else, I didn't have, I want to be like that guy, like I am the Welsh comedy neuroscientist mental health guy, which isn't a role which again was occupied before, so it's hard to do. Like, I just apply my own path. But I will say, if anyone else, I usually credit sort of Spike Milligan, the famous comedian, writer, Irish one. He was his war diaries, I found incredibly. It's still my favorite collection of books. Starts off with Adolf Hitler, my partner's downfall. This is him being drafted in World War II and going to serve in Africa and then Italy, and it's just hilarious. So just him and his soldier mates messing around, having constant scrapes and wacky adventures, because they were just young boys from London just being shipped over to a foreign country. I have no idea what was going on, and yeah, so but they're hilariously funny. But then slowly but surely they also become tragic as he loses people in the war. He gets hit and suffers serious PTSD, which dispels the whole thing over. He had no mental illness back in the war. People were tough then. No, you had whole regiments drafted out with mental health problems. It's not a new thing. But yeah, so that sort of incredible combination of hilarious observations, ridiculous stories, and deep, touching pathos and meaningfulness. It sort of showed me that was possible. That was a thing that you could do. And he had seriously chronic mental health problems his whole life after that, and he still became a massive success and star in this country at least. And that shows, like, again, that informs my thing of, well, someone's got mental health problems doesn't mean anything about what they can and can't do. So yeah, I guess he would be the one who I would say is perhaps the most influential. There's also John Ronson is probably quite a big influence on me, particularly the psychopath test, because he wrote a very deep and meaningful psychological subject, but in a from almost an outside perspective, a very objective, very engaging way of looking at it. And he's from Cardiff himself, John Ronson, so he doesn't sound like that at all. He has his own very unique voice. I don't know how to. I won't do an impression of it because I don't know how to. But yeah, he's one probably the best, that balance of insight and accuracy, objectivity, but also engagement. And I think if anyone's sort of shaped my style, it's probably him.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. When did you know? What was the moment, if there was one, that you knew, or you had the sense that you had crossed from being an amateur writer to a pro?
It was probably that Robin Williams article, I suppose, in that, again, even though I was writing for The Guardian, which is like a major UK publication and worldwide publication, it's an influential presence. I had a presence on that sort of media platform, and I was getting good numbers. Like, I was getting lots of readers and stuff, but the idea that I could write something, even it's largely off the cuff. It was just, this is stuff I know, I think it should be shared, I'm going to put it down in this way, which I think people will like. And to have such a massive response from it, that was when I thought, oh, maybe I can do this. Maybe this is something I should or was meant to do. Mm-hmm. If you believe in destiny and stuff, or fate and things like that. Because I always really liked the writing side of it. And I was never really willing to sort of admit that to myself, that this was a thing I wanted to do. There was actually a period when I was like 12 or 13 when when you start to wonder about what you're going to do with your life. My father asked me, we were in the pub I lived in, and I remember he was ironing a shirt at the time, so he was topless, which is a strange memory. So, yeah, and he was,
I want to meet this guy someday. He sounds amazing.
Yeah, you will. No, he will, but you would enjoy his company. He's a raconteur. And he said, so what do you think I'm doing then? No, he knows exams picking and coming up, and I was like, I don't know. I'm just thinking about it. I said, I like writing. Maybe I could be a writer. And he said, well, you could. Fair play, he didn't dismiss it. He said, you could, but it's a very hard career to get into. It's very rare opportunities. But I don't know how he knew that, but it's true. Yeah. He said you should think maybe something a bit more solid. And I think at the time I was thinking, well, I also like science. Maybe I'll do that. And so there was like a fork in the road. I could have gone for writer or scientist. Went for scientist. but then steered back here anyway. Now I'm a writer again, but sort of come full circle, I suppose. So that moment, or the Robin Williams, and I sort of think this is actually something I should be doing, I guess. And I seem to have a knack for it, I suppose. And that's when that's what I couldn't. I'm a scientist. Like I always thought, like I'm okay at this, but I was always too. I was never too egotistical enough to think it, but to think it was definitely a thing. But then numbers don't lie. 2 million people in 3 or 4 days. That's a lot of people who seem to care about what you think about something. So all right,
that's awesome.
Something's gone right here. Yes,
I'll bet that was really fun to see that.
It was alarming in many ways. Like it was on Twitter at the time. Like who are these people who just keep popping up? And some people didn't like what I said. Like one guy said, "I am from Texas and I disagree with you. Give me your email so I can debunk you properly." I thought, I'm not going to do that. This isn't the most tempting offer I've had. So yeah.
That's funny. What are the qualities of a great sentence, and how can we write more of them?
Oh, there's actually quite a lot of ways to answer that, because I think the quality of a sentence, I guess, is dependent on the context in which you find it. Like a sentence in a poem would be very different from a sentence in a mental health book, like the sort of thing I write. But I guess I'm sort of channeling more my editors than me, though. A great sentence is succinct. It sort of gets to the point, which is something I'm told I should do a lot more of, because I am one of life's wafflers, as you may have noticed from the runtime of this podcast. But yeah, I think a great sentence says what it means to say in as clear a way as possible, I guess. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's simple. It needs to be succinct, but also, I guess directness is probably a really good way, because I'm always thinking in terms of how do I write sentences which relate to explaining how the brain works or how mental health is a thing. So when something is very sort of straightforward but also very informative, those are what I consider to be the best ones. Direct but useful. And I can't give you an off-top example now, because if I could do that on command, I would spend a lot less time writing and a lot less need for editors. But yeah, I think succinctness and usefulness, I think, is what really makes a sentence work for me in the context of my own work.
Yeah.
Because if you want a sort of a period drama romance, you probably want something different. It was a bit more florid, a bit more evocative emotionally. But those are the sort of things I like.
No, that's great. Okay, so my last few relate to marketing and getting once you've written the book to get it out into the world. What have you learned in your time as an author that has surprised you when it comes to marketing and promotion of books?
I guess I was sort of a bit surprised as to how passionate some people are about books. I mean, some people will genuinely go all out for a book, and they will like shout it to the rooftops and sell it everywhere and plug it everywhere. So if you can find someone who likes one of your books like that, they tend to be very good. I've got a lot of sales in Egypt because there's an Egyptian YouTuber who just has become obsessed with the idiot brain, and there's pictures of him online kissing it and stuff. And like, I don't know this guy. I've never encountered him, never met him, but he just keeps constantly referencing it, and it's very much appreciated. I guess from that sort of leads into the more cynical side of things. It's just how much TV and mainstream media like that still has so much clout. I mean, I had a brief appearance on like a Sunday morning show in Britain. Like, it was not the most popular one, it was not the biggest one, but just 10 minutes on there, just see my book on the television. That's shifted thousands of copies and got me like in the bestseller list just by not very long, but it happened.
Wow. Just from that one appearance.
Yeah, that one experience. So like radio is still really quite useful. Like, I didn't realize just how much. Even though they can't see it, you just mention the name of it on a major radio program. That does tend to be very, very powerful. So yeah, the old school media still has a lot of clout. I guess that applies to selling anything, not just books.
Yeah,
but there's also like it's really hard to predict where it'll go down well. I mean, I was on holiday in Mexico in April 2017, I think, and I found out via an email alert that I was the best-selling non-fiction writer in Mexico that week. And
That's so great.
what I said, well, I was like, what do I do now? I mean, I was one in the hotel lobby to see if anyone recognized me, and they didn't because my face wasn't on the cover anyway. So it was like I have no idea why that happened. I don't know how it happened, but it did for a bit. It's still very much a game of chance. It's still very much how it's hard to say what will go down well and what won't. But yeah, I think the old school media has still got a lot of power and influence when it comes to marketing stuff. So if you can get them on board, then that's useful. As much as, again, there are plenty of people who have a massive online following, like the huge Twitter account, or like the mummy bloggers tend to be very, very well respected online, and they sell a lot of books as a result of that, without ever doing the traditional platforms. But yeah, there's a lot of variables to work on. But sometimes it just makes sense. Like mainstream media does tend to have more power when it comes to getting word of the book out there. So there we go.
That makes sense. What have you learned that you thought was like a sure thing when it came to marketing or promoting the book that turned out any book that turned out to be like a total dud or a waste of time?
I think there's actually one solid example, but there are sort of, if something is potentially geared towards your subject matter, it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the best place to go. As in, I did lots of articles for platforms and publications which were very much in the science communication, popular science field, and they went fine, but they didn't cause much of a bump in sales or so on. I think it's because you're sort of both preaching to the choir a bit there, and you're up against a lot of people who are doing similar things to you. So it's when you sort of do your stuff, like I do neuroscience things, in a more non-scientific capacity, like in a more broadsheet newspaper or a radio show, which is just a call-in or like a chat show thing, that has more impact because that's not what people are used to hearing in that capacity. Like it's that sort of thing. So I think, if you think, well, when you think like this place, this platform, this publication is my people, they're the one I want to get into, that often can be nowhere near as helpful as you think it is, because that's the people who are either already fully aware of you or are fully aware of similar things. So yeah, you just sort of try to get a piece of a very, very oversubscribed pie there, whereas branching out is probably a better approach, but even if it is counterintuitive.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then the other, so maybe the final question here is when you write, if you're like most writers I talk to, you're simultaneously, of course, you're writing for an audience, but you're also writing for yourself in a way, in some way.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And so I love what you described just a few minutes ago about in the morning, you'll do social media, in the afternoon, you'll do writing. And you seem to have a very, like a balance with that. That you're aware of the audience and you're interacting with them and things like that.
Yeah.
As somebody who is creating a long form content like a book, how do you exist in both worlds simultaneously effectively? That immediate social media milieu that we're in, and then the longer rhythms of a book.
Yeah, that actually is something I've struggled with a lot. Not so much the social media side, but because I came into writing via blogging. Especially when you're on like The Guardian, where the turnaround time is like, I'd submit a blog in the morning, it would be up by lunchtime, and within 12, 24 hours, if it's succeeded or not, because if it made the front page of the website, if it sort of got social media traction, you can see the numbers going up and down on the tracking software. It, you can like 24 hours later, it did 23,000 hits. That's a decent performance. Where it did like something like 100,000. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a keeper. You just know either way. Whereas, like the second time, my second book was out, I was like in the city centre on publication day, and I was like wandering around going, and then I thought, well, I didn't get any particular emails. I didn't get any notifications. It's failed. It's been out 12 hours. What do you want? It's a book. It'll take a while to leave the shelves. People are going to take people on the day to read it.
People are working. Yeah,
exactly. It's like, what did they want? It was a Wednesday. Like, it wasn't exactly, it wasn't like a Harry Potter release. It wouldn't be, would it? But so like, I still need to get out that mindset. But when it comes to like actually writing a long form, I guess Idiot Brain was the easiest one because it was like a sort of a selection of blog things. Like I was doing my regular blog at the same time. Like I can see what's working there. Like, oh, should I introduce this back into it? But that is something a lot of writers to eventually get over. Like you, towards the end of the book, especially thinking, oh, this is all pointless. No one's going to like this. I hate this. Like, and you sort of lose faith with it because that is sort of how the brain works. We expect reward for our efforts, and the longer it takes between effort and reward, the more the brain dissociates between them. As in, well, this is pointless. Why am I working so hard when there's nothing to show for it apart from just blocks and blocks of text, which no one has seen yet? So it's a tricky one. But yeah, if you can occasionally share snippets, you can tell people about what's going on in it if you want that sort of feedback. And I guess I've got an editor too, so I'm constantly sending him a chapter. He'll send it back, tell me what he thinks. So there is some engagement still there. But yeah, that is a particularly tricky one, and it'll vary from person to person. But just keeping your hand in the online world can be useful in that respect. But sometimes it's actually better to shut it off. This is me and this book now. I need to, just for my own sake, I need to finish it, if nothing else, and and then go from there, I suppose. So yeah, it's a struggle. It's a constant one.
Right on. Okay. Well, Dean, I am so grateful that we had this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope you have too.
Yeah, it's been great. Nice one.
Yeah. So I know it's we're separated by an ocean, and it's probably getting close to your bedtime. So I won't keep you any longer. But I'm not sure when or where our paths will cross again, but I'm sure they will. I'll definitely let you know when this releases. It'll be sometime in the new year.
Yeah, of course, that'd be great.
But I'll do that. And in the meantime, I wish you much success with your next project.
Well, thanks very much, Brian. Thank you for this, and I look forward to listening to the finished article.
Despite living in an age where we have more comforts and conveniences than ever before, life isn't working for many people. Whether it's in the developed world, where we're dealing with depression, anxiety, addiction, divorce, jobs we hate, relationships that don't work, or people in the developing world who don't have access to clean water or sanitation or healthcare or education, or who live in conflict zones, there's a lot of people on the planet that life isn't working very well for. If you're one of those people, I invite you to connect with me at goodliving.com. I've created Life's Best Practices Breakthrough Coaching to help you navigate the transitions that we all go through. Whether you've just graduated school, you're going through a divorce, you just got married, you're headed into retirement, you're starting a business, you just lost your job, whatever it is you're facing, I've developed a 36-week course that you go through with me and a community of achievers and seekers who are committed to improving their own lives and the lives of others. So through this online program, you will have the opportunity to go deep into every area of your life, explore life's big questions, create answers for yourself in community, get clarity and accountability. If that's something you're interested to learn about, I invite you to contact me directly at brian@brianmiller.com or by visiting goodliving.com.